All right, what is up, Utes fans? This is Joseph back with the Utah Utes Football Digest, and it is now time to start really breaking down the Rose Bowl. I'm super excited to be doing this with you guys. The first thing we're going to be talking about is going to be Penn State's offense against Utah's defense. So, what does Penn State's offense want to do? What is Penn State's offense good at doing, right? That could be separate from what they want to do. And then what is Utah good at defensively? So it should be an awesome conversation here. And for strength of schedule, Utah was the number 21 strength of schedule in college football, and Penn State was number 10. So close, but you got to give a decent edge, at least a slight edge to Penn State. It's about an 11 spot gap there in strength of schedule. I do think some of that has a little bit to do with the overinflation of how good people think the Big Ten is when there's a lot of bad teams in the Big Ten. But we'll take it at face value. We'll give the slight edge to conference, to strength of schedule, to Penn State and Utah, the slight disadvantage there. But on that note, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's take a look at Penn State's offense versus Utah's defense. All right, and so to start the conversation, we'll start with Penn State's offense, and you don't have to go much further than Sean Clifford. Now, even well before I knew we were playing Penn State in the Rose Bowl, I'd probably heard the name Sean Clifford, 10, 20 times. I watch Penn State when they're on, they're a pretty good football team. And just in general, his name gets brought up a lot. And from what I consistently hear with Sean Clifford, it's, just inconsistency. It's that he's real hot and real cold. At least that's what I hear from everyone when they talk about Sean Clifford. The guy has some tools, has some upside, but it doesn't always show up. Like you look at the games when they played the good competition, right? So that's going to be Michigan and that's going to be Ohio State. Against Ohio State, he was gunslinging it, 32 for 47, 371 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, right? So yeah, he was gunslinging it, but that also led to 3 interceptions. So I'd call that probably an average to below average game against Ohio State, right? Not a great game when he's playing great competition. And then against Michigan, it was pretty dreadful, right? We take a look here, 7 for 19 for 120 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 picks, and a QB rating of 36.8. But don't let me paint a picture that Sean Clifford sucks. He's a solid quarterback. You look at a lot of other games on this schedule, and they're pretty damn good. Like Purdue, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. Purdue's not a bad team. Michigan State, not a great team, but still 202 yards, 4 touchdowns. So a guy that can definitely make it happen. Let's pull up his stats in a little more detail here. He also has 177 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. So he is a threat with his feet, but definitely more of a threat with his arm than he is with his feet. And it does seem like when he goes up against good teams, he struggles, but overall he is a good player. So that's Sean Clifford, kind of the heartbeat of this offense. Uh, and this is probably his last college football game, as far as I'm aware. So considering that, he's going to come out, he's going to try to get it done, and he's going to give it everything he's got. But a guy that does seem to struggle in the big moments, and isn't always up to the level of the competition when he plays really tough teams. Okay, now let's look at Nick Singleton. Nick Singleton is what some people have said the best running back at Penn State since Saquon Barkley. That doesn't mean that he's on the level of Saquon Barkley, but they're saying, since Saquon Barkley, they haven't seen someone this good. I hope that makes sense. So, looking at Nick Singleton, 149 carries in the season for 941 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, 6.3 yards per carry average. We take a look here, some really good games, right? 179 yards against Ohio, 124 yards against Auburn, 122 yards against Maryland. But what do all those teams have in common? Not that Maryland is terrible, but when you look at those 3 teams, if that's where you're getting a lot of your rushing yards, That's not exactly a great sign, right? Let's take a look at the games where he played a little better competition in Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan, 6 carries, 19 yards, 3.2 yards per carry. Ohio State, 14 carries, 45 yards, 3.2 yards per carry. So, when he played some of the better teams, but let's be fair. Maybe Purdue. Okay, so even worse against Purdue. So I won't use Purdue as an example, but they have it listed here. His average yards per rush against top 25 teams is 3.2 yards per carry. I've watched some tape on Nick Singleton, and when I watch him, he is a very good player, but he's more of a like all or nothing kind of guy. It feels like he's either he makes a few huge plays a game that really change what his rushing averages look like. And if he doesn't make that play in your game, he just, it's not going to be there, right? He won't have great stats if he doesn't get one of those huge plays before the game's over. So that's Nick Singleton there. All right, now let's take a look at the PFF grades for Sean Clifford and Nick Singleton. So Sean Clifford, 77.4 grade. That's pretty good. The number 99 quarterback in college football, grade wise, but it's not that it includes a lot of QBs that are in like FCS, all that sort of stuff. So with that, it's a pretty good grade, right? A little bit of that has a receiving grade in there, and his run grade's not great, but a good passing grade. So you got to think he does make plays. He is a good player. I'd say the PFF grade looks better than his stats look. So that's a good sign for Penn State fans, right? To me, when I watch him, I mean, you wind up watching these guys usually in their big games. And I felt like there was something lacking, right? There's that it factor that QBs have that Sean Clifford just didn't have for me. Now, Nick Singleton for me is a little different. So slightly lower PFF grade, but a 77 for a quarterback is really similar to a 74 for a running back. It kind of goes up and down based on that. But yeah, Nick Singleton, really good running back, right? Good pass blocker too. Not a very good receiver though. That's surprising. But like I said, a guy that can, when the play's there, he hits the hole and makes a huge play. That's who he is. That's what he does. So those are the PFF grades for those two guys if you wanted to see those. All right, now for the Utah defense. Who are the star players of the Utah defense? Just so you guys know, Clark Phillips has opted out, so that plays a factor in who I'm picking here. But the first guy, even if Clark Phillips was in, would probably be one of the guys I'd pick. Cole Bishop, you know, a guy that had a ton of hype at the end of last year. Everyone was so high on Cole Bishop and didn't have not a bad start to this season, but I think we were all expecting him to come out and be a straight stud. And he kind of was just, he was decent at the beginning of the year. But over time, as the season progressed, he's become a leader on this defense and is really doing a great job for the Utes. So let's talk about his games here. So the big one is that Pac-12 championship game, 9 tackles, 7 solo tackles, 2 assists, a straight, just a really good player in this guy. Colorado game, 2 tackles. It's probably because our safeties didn't need to make any tackles when we played Colorado. So that's probably a factor there. Oregon, 6 tackles. Stanford, he got half a sack. I mean, the guy is a very good player in general. Cole Bishop is for those Penn State fans watching, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, Cole Bishop lays the wood, dude. He's a hard hitting safety and he cracks, dude. He sure tackler, good pass rusher, and he lights you up in the run game. So, really good player in Cole Bishop. All right, now let's talk about Karine Reed. This guy, really similar to Cole Bishop, where he had a bunch of plays last year. He was a little different. He was like he would show up really big in games and not so big in other games last year, his freshman year. But this year, he really kind of put it all together and became a lot more of a reliable guy on almost any down. And just to give you guys an idea who he is, he's versatile. He can rush the passer. He can defend the run. He can cover. Just a very well-rounded linebacker. You take a look here: 68 tackles, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 pick. I think that kind of tells the story I was just kind of telling you guys about. Karine Reed, very good player. A guy, you'll see a mistake every now and then, but not often. In general, he's got a good number of tackles each game. And you see a lot of his sacks were in this little 4-game streak here against some pretty good teams: UCLA, USC, Washington State, Arizona. So that's Karine Reed, another guy to keep an eye on. In general, there's a lot of good players on defense. I had to pick two. I felt like these were a good two. So I hope you guys appreciated who I picked there. All right, guys, and here is the PFF grades for Cole Bishop and Karine Reed. First, we'll look at Cole Bishop. So, kind of like I was saying here, right, guys, a very good pass rusher. That 90 pass rush grade is always impressive. That's on 58 rush snaps, so that's not exactly like a tiny sample size. It's small, but it's enough to where you're like, damn, this guy really rushes the passer well. And even though his stats didn't have a ton of sacks, he gets a lot of hurries, dude. He gets back there and hurries quarterbacks a lot. Again, pretty good in coverage as well at a 72.9. Run defense above average there, 69. So solid player there in Cole Bishop, a guy that is so damn dependable and really makes plays when we need them to be made. And then linebacker, let's check out Karine Reed. All right. Karine Reed. This is basically the grade for the whole season. So these are kind of fun to look at. Karine Reed, you take a look here, 72.7 overall grade, run defense grade 69.7, pass rush 70.5, coverage 70.5. It's almost exactly how I told the story, right? Just right down the middle. Every grade is pretty damn good. It's a solid grade everywhere. A guy that doesn't that he went from he went from not making a lot of he went from making a lot of mistakes to being a guy that's not making a lot of mistakes, does pretty well in each category. That's Karine Reed. But like I've been saying, there's a lot of good players in that Utah defense. I just chose two that I wanted to mention specifically. All right, guys. Now we've all been waiting for how do the teams actually match up? So Penn State's offense against Utah's defense. So what is Penn State trying to do when they're on the field? So pass play percentage. So how many of their total offensive plays are pass plays is about 47%. So about 47% of the time they're trying to throw the ball. Run play percentage is 52%. So a little over half the time they're trying to run the ball. So a very small lean towards the run, but a pretty balanced offense, right? That's pretty down the middle. Both those numbers are right at average in the country. So they're running and passing a very similar amount during the game. Now let's take a look at how Penn State's attack actually matches up with Utah's defense. So when we look at these numbers, let's remember that Utah was the number 21 schedule in the country, and Penn State was the number 10 schedule in the country. So every number we look at, we got to give a small edge to Penn State. So the first thing we're going to look at is going to be pass yards per game. So pass yards per game, Penn State averages 250.3 yards per game passing. That's number 46 in the country. So pretty good there. And then Utah is allowing 233 passing yards per game to their opponents, which is number 77 in the country. So when you adjust there, right, you adjust for the fact that Penn State has played some tough, they've played a tough schedule. I think you got to give a clear edge to Penn State there, right? When it comes to passing. And then you count Clark Phillips not being in. I mean, you got to imagine Penn State's probably throwing for 260 to 275 passing yards during this game. They're going to be able to throw the ball, right? Sean Clifford is going to be able to get it done. But I do want to make an observation. Actually, I'll touch on it in a second. We'll talk about that in a second. But I would just say if there's anyone we want to put the game in the hands of, maybe Sean Clifford is that guy, if that makes sense, guys. I'm just saying, like, if they're going to have something they do well passing, Sean Clifford can choke hard sometimes. And I would imagine if it comes down to a final drive where, they have to air it out to get it down the field, I don't see Sean Clifford doing that. I also want to make an observation about our passing yards allowed. We have the majority of those yards in in a few games for our defense where we just got diced up by USC diced everybody up, dude. All right, and then rush yards per game. So this is where it's going to look a little more favorable towards Utah. So rush yards per game, Penn State allows 182.1 rush yards per game. That's number 40, or they get 182.1 rush yards per game. That's number 49 in the country. Utah gets 112.3 rush yards per game, super low, which is number 19 in the country. So when we look at that right there, I think that that tells you a little bit of something, right? When you think about these two teams going at it, they're going to want to run the ball, right? They want to run the ball half the time. They probably are using that to open up play action, open up the shots downfield for Sean Clifford. And the fact that it sounds like to me they're going to struggle running the ball. When I look at those numbers, I'm going to go ahead and imagine that they're going to have about 135 to 145 rushing yards against Utah, which is, it's going to limit what they can do on offense. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And then let's go ahead and look at scoring offenses. So, Penn State's scoring offense points per game is 35.8, which is number 15 in the country. Boom. And Utah's, let me pull that up. Boom. I didn't have this one preloaded. That's my bad, guys. All right. So Utah's scoring offense per game is going to be, or defense points allowed per game is 21.5. And that is going to be number 25 in the country. Um, So we've got an offense in Penn State that scores a lot of points and a defense in Utah that doesn't allow a lot of points scored. So I'm just going to kind of recap those scores real quick. So Penn State scores 35.8 points per game on average, which is number 15 in the country, where Utah's defense allows 21.5 points per game, which is number 25 in the country. When you meet those two in the middle and then you adjust slightly for the fact that Penn State has played a tougher schedule, this offense is probably going to put up some points on us, guys. I'm not saying they're going to rack it up, but they are going to put up points on us. So, what we're looking at here for Penn State's offense when they play Utah's defense is around 28 to 31 points. And they're going to get that off 135 to 145 rushing yards and 260 to 275 passing yards. So I would say they're not exactly going to dominate our defense, but I would say they have some favorable matchups. They're a tough team. I think as I've learned more about this, the Penn State team, and broken down the numbers and looked at their schedule, and I remember that game they played against Ohio State. This is a good team. We're going to need to come correct if we want to get this win. Guys, that'll be it for this video. Please make sure you guys like the video. Helps get this out to more Utes fans. Also, make sure you guys comment down below. Do you agree with what I'm looking at? Let me know your thoughts. And make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be putting out a bunch more Rose Bowl content in the coming days. And this is just going to be the first video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm out of here. Go Utes.